The stars whispered over the high plains of Proxima Station, a quiet cry beneath the silence of deep space. In the bitter wind of the landing platform, drenched in shadows and fading warmth, the little alien girl was cradled in the arms of a man who had never expected to hold something so fragile, so foreign, and yet so heartbreakingly human. She was small, no larger than a child of 6. Though her skin shimmered like moonlight fractured through glass, her breath came shallow, and her eyes' deep obsidian wells were filled not with fear, but a profound, echoing sadness that transcended language. The transport ship that had brought her screeched into the void, its engines cutting across the sky like an accusation. They had left her, dumped her like broken cargo. A mistake they did not wish to keep. No name was given. No transmission sent. No explanation offered. Just the silent retreat of an alien delegation with hearts colder than their diplomatic promises. The man stood still for a long moment, the girl barely conscious in his grasp, her body too light, too warm, as if she burned with some invisible fever. Around them, no one moved. The few port workers nearby looked away, muttered, kept their hands buried in their jackets and their routines. No one wanted to touch the story they couldn't understand. It wasn't their problem. It wasn't human. It wasn't supposed to be here, but it was. Caleb Renner was not a remarkable man. He wasn't a hero, a soldier, or a leader. He fixed filtration units on colony outposts, patched leaks in habitats, and knew the cold math of oxygen per cubic meter better than he knew politics or alien law. Yet something twisted inside him, sharp and wrong, as he looked down at the girl. Her chest rising so slowly, her skin so alien and luminous and perfect. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply stared at him, as if daring him to see her, not the species, not the politics, not the problem, but her. And something in his chest cracked open, quietly and with force. What the hell happened? To her, he asked, to no one in particular. But there were no answers. Just the sound of the wind catching on steel, and the whisper of the ship's fading trail. His hands trembled as he adjusted her in his arms, trying not to flinch at how thin she was. Under the shimmer of her skin, her bones felt like bird glass. She shouldn't have survived the journey, but she had. There was no protocol for this. No contact from the alien faction, one of the fringe coalitions who treated the Galactic Alliance like a buffet table of benefits. Caleb had seen their kind before, in committee recordings and travel warnings. Cold faces, hot machines, no empathy, no patience, and no use for the weak, especially one of their own who did not meet their standard of perfection. Rumors said they altered their young. Rumors said they abandoned those who failed. Now one of them was here, small and shivering in the arms of a man who barely knew how to help a wounded cat. He carried her, legs unsteady, past the checkpoint scanners that hissed and blinked in sterile indifference. The guards didn't stop him. Maybe they knew. Maybe they didn't care. He didn't either. All he knew was that her tiny hand, clawed but delicate, had curled slightly around the fabric of his coat. She held on. Not tightly, just enough to say, "Don't go." He reached the med bay. A nurse looked up, startled, her eyes widening as she registered the alien shape and the human holding it. "Where did you—" "She was left," Caleb said, voice too quiet. "They left her. They took her." Machines hissed. Scanners clicked. Fluids were administered. Caleb watched, standing like a statue at the edge of the room, the ache in his arms lingering as if her weight had imprinted on his bones. The girl stirred once, moaned softly in a voice like broken crystal, and then fell back into sleep. The nurse glanced at him once, with a strange look, part sympathy, part alarm. "She's malnourished. Her organs are... we don't even recognize half of them. But she's alive. Barely." Caleb looked at her, unconscious beneath the white lights. The only thing from a distant world that had ever looked more human than most people he knew. Then we keep her alive. The nurse hesitated. The station commander won't like this. You know that, right? They'll want her gone. Back to wherever she came from. She's not a package. Caleb's voice had an edge now, the kind that didn't rise in volume, but cut deeper than any shout. She's a person. And with that, the weight of the moment settled in. The little alien girl wasn't just a casualty. She was a choice. A mirror. A question dot and Caleb Renner, just a repairman with cracked knuckles and tired eyes, had chosen to answer it. Asterisk. Caleb sat beside the medbay cot long after the lights had dimmed and the nurses' steps had faded into the hum of quiet machines. The little alien girl, still unnamed, still barely clinging to life, lay motionless beneath a shimmering medical sheath designed to adapt to foreign biology. She didn't stir, but her chest rose more steadily now. The machines beeped in slow rhythm, and with each sound, he felt a fragile thread tightening between them. He hadn't gone home. He couldn't. Every time he moved toward the door, some part of him flinched, like guilt would gnaw into him if he left her alone again. Someone had done that once already. Someone with more power, more knowledge, someone colder. He wouldn't be that person. The medical officer finally returned, this time with a data pad in one hand and caution in her eyes. Her physiology is extraordinary. Adaptive metabolism, neural interface organs. She's young, very young, but built to interface with machines on a level we've never seen. It's not just evolution, it's intentional. Caleb frowned. You mean ... engineered? The officer nodded. Yes, and imperfectly. There are ... flaws, failures. Maybe that's why they abandoned her. He clenched his fists, a deep scowl, shadowing his face, so she wasn't good enough. They just threw her out like garbage. Caleb, the woman said softly, this might be a diplomatic issue. If she's genetically modified in violation of interstellar code, she's not technically protected under sentient refugee law, and her people, they don't tolerate outsiders interfering. If we keep her, we might bring trouble. He looked at the girl again. She shifted slightly in her sleep. He swore her eyes fluttered for a heartbeat, as though she could hear them through whatever drug kept her still. And then, in a whisper barely audible, she murmured a sound. A word. Maybe not even a word, just a note of pain, the kind of child. Makes it a nightmare. Caleb didn't even pause. Then let the trouble come. The officer's mouth tightened. We'll need to notify the station commander. Do that, he said, with a tone that didn't ask for permission. But she's staying with me. When she wakes, I'll be there. And he was 3 days past in a slow, aching fog. Caleb moved only to eat and wash. He slept in a stiff chair beside her cot. Sometimes the nurses would whisper in corners, wondering what he was doing there, why he cared. They didn't say it cruelly, but they said it like he was broken, like something had cracked inside him and latched onto this helpless creature who didn't even look human, but he knew why. He remembered the time his own daughter had fallen sick, years ago, fevered and small and pale in a hospital bed back on Earth. She had survived, barely, and he had never left her side. The fear that had gripped him then was the same now. And then, on the morning of the 4th day, the girl opened her eyes. No alarm, no movement. Just the gentle, liquid blink of someone who had known darkness too long. Her pupils dilated into midnight. Her silver skin shimmered beneath the filtered light. And she looked at Caleb not with confusion, not with fear, but recognition. As if she had been waiting for him all this time. Hey there, he said softly. You're safe. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Caleb leaned forward. It's okay. Take your time. She tried again, her voice a dry whisper. strange in tone but not in feeling. Why that help? He swallowed. It wasn't just a question. It was a plea. One shaped by abandonment, by betrayal, by a world that had thrown her away before she ever had the chance to speak for herself. Because no one else did, he said. Because I couldn't watch them leave you. Because you're not trash, not a failure. You're alive. That's enough for me. She stared at him for a long moment, and then a single tear slid from her dark eye. It shimmered like starlight on her cheek, and Caleb felt something twist in his chest again, something deeper than guilt or duty. This was the moment, he realized, where humanity showed its strength, not in muscle or guns or ships, but in the choice to care for something utterly other. Without asking for a reward or a recognition, the girl lifted a weak hand and touched his arm. Her fingers were warm now. I remember, she said. You held me. Yes, he nodded, and I won't let go. The room was still, the moment tender but heavy, as though the universe held its breath for this quiet bond forged not in fire, but in gentleness. The door opened. A uniformed officer entered, stern-faced. Mr. Renner, the station commander wants to speak with you. Immediately. Caleb stood, gently brushing the girl's hand. Stay here, he whispered. I'll be back. She blinked once and in. Her gaze was the seed of something new, trust, and fear. As he followed the officer down the corridor, Caleb felt the weight of the coming storm gather at his back. He would face it for her. They named her Liana. Caleb gave her the name after a flowering vine from Earth, one that grew even in places where nothing else dared to bloom. The girl didn't speak when he offered it, not right away. She only blinked, her inky black eyes deep with something ancient and sorrowful. But later, when he said it again softly, like a secret between them, she touched her chest and whispered it back, Liana. And that was how it began. She healed slowly. Not just the bruises or the malnutrition, but the wounds underneath, ones that had nothing to do with her body and everything to do with the look she carried. Hollow and quiet, like someone who had been born into a world that never wanted her. Her species had no word for love, the med officer had told Caleb. No cultural reference for kindness without function. Everything in their society had a purpose. Children were born in engineered batches, assigned utility metrics. Those who met thresholds were kept. Those who didn't disappeared. Caleb didn't ask how many, like Liana, had vanished before someone decided to send her off-planet with a forged medcrate code and no return instructions. He didn't want to know. What mattered was that she was here now, and she was beginning to speak. He brought her soft foods, learning which ones her body could tolerate. He read to her from old books, translating phrases slowly until her mimicry became comprehension. One day, she asked what a father was. He told her. She didn't speak for hours afterward, just watched him with a strange expression, her silver-tinted hands curled in her lap like folded wings. That night, she called. Him, Caleb, not you. It was a small thing. But it broke him a little, because it meant she had finally stopped seeing him as just the man who saved her and started seeing him as someone real, someone permanent. Outside the med bay, pressure was mounting. The station commander called him in again and again, demanding explanations. There were diplomatic signals from the alien syndicate now, cloaked in threat and courtesy. They wanted Liana returned not as a child, not as a citizen, but as unauthorized genetic property. The term made Caleb's blood boil. She's not property, he snapped during one meeting, fists clenched on the cold metal table. She's a child. She's a biological anomaly, the commander corrected. And we're not equipped to be the moral compass of the galaxy, Mr. Renner. Caleb didn't respond. He was tired of fighting people who had never looked into. Her eyes never heard her say his name in that soft, trembling voice like it was the first safe thing she'd ever learned to say. One evening, as Proxima's twin moons cast low shadows across the observation deck, Liana sat beside him, legs crossed beneath a thick blanket. She was stronger now, though her voice still cracked when she got excited. She had begun drawing strange shapes and circuits, alien symbols that twisted in ways no human alphabet could match. "What are these?" Caleb asked gently, watching her sketch. "Dreams," she said. "I used to see them before." He didn't press, but she looked at him, something vulnerable blooming in her alien face. They connected us back home, all of us. Through the machines, no voices, just signals. We were one thought, many minds. But I was broken. I didn't sink. She paused, and her fingers trembled. They said I was silence. Caleb stared at her. His chest ached, and now? He asked, thought she looked up at him, eyes shimmering with tears. "Now I hear you. And it's warm." He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't flinch. Her fingers were colder than his, but they curled around his with a tentative strength. "You're not broken," he said. They were just deaf to what mattered. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It pulsed between them like a shared breath. The station was preparing. Talks with the syndicate were escalating. Rumors spread like frost over steel. A human civilian harboring alien biotech? It was unprecedented, illegal, dangerous, but Caleb didn't care. He'd seen what the others hadn't, the way Liana's laughter had emerged slowly, like the sound of wind through a once dead forest. The way she would lean into stories now, eyes wide. The way she once cried when he told her about Rain. She had never seen it. "I want to go to Earth someday," she said quietly. "Is it loud?" Caleb smiled. "Yeah, it's messy and loud and beautiful. You'd like it. There's birds and oceans. And thunder." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Will you take me there?" "If it's the last thing I do." That night, Liana fell asleep with her hand wrapped around his. Caleb stayed awake, watching her breathe. Every breath she took was a defiance. Every heartbeat was proof that she mattered, that she wasn't silence anymore. She was becoming something more, and so was he. Asterisk, it started with a whisper. Not the kind Caleb could hear with his ears, but something deeper, a ripple through the station systems. Too quiet for alarms, but loud enough for the medbay's AI diagnostics to notice. At first, it was brushed off as background noise. Proxima's orbit around the nebula often dragged weird signals from passing debris clusters or satellite echoes. But this one didn't fade. It grew, patterned, purposeful. Caleb noticed it because Liana had started waking up in the middle of the night again. She would sit upright, eyes wide, her breath caught in her throat like a silent scream. She didn't cry, never cried, not like a human child might, but there was panic in the way her fingers trembled, the way her eyes darted to the walls, as if seeing something bleed through them. "They're calling," she said on the third night. "I don't want to hear them." Caleb tried to comfort her, but it was different now. Her skin buzzed faintly under his touch, warm and flickering like static. She was changing, he could see it, and she could feel it. Something in her was responding to that signal, something she couldn't control. He brought the data to the med officer, who ran it through deeper decryption layers. That's when the truth broke free like a fracture in glass. "It's not just a signal," she said. Pale as the diagnostics glowed behind her. "It's a recall protocol." Caleb's stomach dropped. "What do you mean? Recall?" "They've activated something in her neural interface, something embedded at the genetic level. A failsafe, a command signal. It's waking up a dormant protocol in her body. She's responding, whether she wants to or not." Liana stood nearby, silent. She had heard it all. Her face was still, but tears now ran freely from her obsidian eyes. What happens if it completes? Caleb asked, even though he already knew. His throat burned. The officer didn't answer at first. Then, we think, it will kill her. The silence after that word stretched unlike gravity. The syndicate hadn't just discarded her, they'd planted a command to erase her if she ever escaped. She wasn't meant to survive. Even far from their control, they had built a tether, a leash made of biology and betrayal, and now it was pulling tight. I don't want to die, Liana whispered. Her voice was so small it shattered something inside Caleb's chest. I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted to be me. He knelt beside her, cupping her face with both hands. You didn't do anything wrong. They did. They were scared. Of what you are, she sniffled. What am I? You're someone they couldn't control. That's why they're afraid. The officer looked back at the screen. We can try to block it. We'll need to isolate the interface network in her brain cut, the relay node. But it's experimental, risky. We've never done it before, not on a neural structure this alien. Caleb looked at Liana. What do you want to do? She paused. I want to live, even if it hurts. So they prepared. The medbay transformed overnight into an operating theater with specialists pulled from every department. The commander did not approve the procedure. He claimed it was reckless, unauthorized. But Caleb overrode it, using every favor, every backdoor link he could leverage from his years of unnoticed service. He didn't care about chain of command anymore. He cared about one life. Her life. Before the procedure, he sat with her one last time, her tiny hand cradled in his. She looked up at him, her breath shaky. Will you still be here? She asked, always. What if I forget you? Then I'll remind you, he said, pressing her hand to his chest. As many times as it takes. And then she was taken into the light. The procedure lasted hours. They traced the signal through neural corridors that no human scanner had mapped before. They found the kill code coiled deep in the base of her brain like a sleeping snake and burned it out, node by node, without harming the systems that made her feel, dream, speak. It was like peeling apart the layers of a song to remove a single poison note without shattering the melody dot, and in the end, against the odds, she survived. Slept for 2 days after. When she woke, Caleb was there. As promised, I dreamed, she whispered, about water and stars and your voice. He smiled. You're free now. But even as she smiled back, he could feel it in the air. This wasn't over. The syndicate had sent the signal. They knew she lived. And now they would come, not just for her, but for the man who had defied them. The ship appeared without warning. No diplomatic greeting. No beacon transmission. It tore out of subspace above Proxima Station like a black blade, its hull silent and monolithic, wrapped in shadow armor that bent light into the void around it. The station's proximity alarms shrieked for the first time in years, and then were silenced with surgical precision as the intruder's signal hijacked every frequency on the command deck. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was colder than that. A single sentence, broadcast in harsh, mechanical rhythm, returned the subject. Or be deemed complicit. Caleb stood in the center of the medbay with the message playing over and over in his ears, his mind trying to outrun the gravity of what it meant. They weren't threatening attack. They were stating intent. There would be no negotiations, no hearings, no alliances to protect him. The syndicate had judged already. They had come to erase. Liana was awake. She sat against the wall beside the diagnostic table, arms wrapped around her knees, staring out the narrow window as if she could feel the ship's presence in her bones. Maybe she could. Maybe whatever part of her that used to connect with them still sensed their pull, like gravity dragging her soul back into orbit. They found me, she said quietly. I didn't think they would come themselves. Caleb knelt beside her. They didn't come for you. Not really. They came for control. You broke their system when you lived. When you chose to stay yourself, her hands trembled. They'll kill you, Caleb. I've made peace with that. Her voice cracked. I haven't. Outside, the commander had already ordered evacuation drills to begin. Civilian transports were being loaded. Families fled. Engineers worked around the clock trying to engage the station's old defense grid, barely functional after decades of peacetime neglect. The Syndicate's ship did not fire. It waited. Patient as a guillotine, then came the second message. It wasn't sent through standard channels. It came through her. Liana screamed. Caleb caught her just before she collapsed, her body writhing in his arms, her eyes blazing silver like lightning trapped in mirrors. A signal hijacked deep and violent had forced its way into her neural system even after the recall command had been removed. It wasn't a kill switch this time. It was a beacon, a tether to her genetic identity. They weren't asking for her return anymore. They were dragging her. The med officer ran scans, hands flying over the console. They're using a quantum resonance lock. Her DNA is unique structure. They're syncing with it remotely, like a magnet. Caleb's jaw clenched. Can we block it? The answer came with a long, horrible pause. Yes, but not with software. You'd need to destroy the entire interface structure or mask her signal inside another. Caleb looked at her sharply. Another what? A compatible biological signature. Something that can mimic her core frequency, draw the tether away from her long enough for her to be moved or hidden. In English, she looked up. Another body. The idea landed in the room like a meteor. Liana lay quiet now, curled on the floor, recovering from the neural spike. She had heard it too. Her eyes, glassy and dim, met Caleb's. No, she whispered. You're not ... not for me. I'm not letting them take you, he said. The med officer raised her voice. Caleb, if you do this, if you let them lock onto your biopattern, you'll be marked. Permanently. You won't just be in danger. You'll be a ghost on every syndicate blacklist. You'll never be able to go home, never be safe. He stood. His voice was low, steady. Home isn't a place, it's her. The decision was made in silence. The procedure took only minutes. A genetic bridge was forged, a false frequency constructed from Caleb's cellular blueprint and pulsed through a microsynth node implanted under his skin. To the Syndicate's sensors, he would now look like her. When it was done, Caleb didn't feel different. But he was. Somewhere out there, a ship was now pointing all its wrath at the wrong heartbeat. The station commander tried to stop him. You're going to die. For what? An alien child? Caleb didn't answer, not with words. He just held Liana's hand and turned away. She begged him one last time. Please, don't do this. I'd rather they take me than take you. He smiled. They already took too much from you. This is one thing they don't get. And with that, he suited up. He walked alone through the pressurized corridor to the transport hangar, the false signal pulsing in his blood like borrowed thunder. The plan was simple. The Syndicate would detect the signal moving. They'd assume she was being escorted off station. They'd follow. He would draw them away. Alone. He climbed into the old courier vessel, one barely held together by sealant and hope, and he launched. The tether lock engaged within minutes. They took the bait. Behind him, Liana watched from the window, a tiny figure under pale white lights, hand pressed to the glass as the man who saved her disappeared into the black dot. No words, only the silence. Of sacrifice. Asterisk. The stars outside the cockpit shimmered like broken glass, scattered across the vast black. Caleb gripped the control sticks of the courier vessel with steady hands, even as every alarm in the system screamed at him in fury. Hull stress, reactor overheating. Tracking locks confirmed. The Syndicate's ship was behind him now, fully. engaged, matching his acceleration, closing the distance not with haste, but with grim precision. They weren't worried. They knew they had him. Caleb wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even a pilot. Not really. He knew enough to fly basic freighters between colonies and enough to patch a hull breach without choking on vacuum. But now he was. Dancing with a death machine designed by a species that treated empathy as a virus and fear as currency. And yet he smiled, because every second they followed him was a second. Liana lived. The false signal encoded in his blood was working perfectly. The Syndicate sensors believed he was the subject. They believed she was fleeing. Their arrogance made them blind. They didn't know that what they chased was a man with nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. The first strike came without ceremony. A proximity mine unfolded in his wake, caught in the ship's dying engine field, and blew the rear stabilizers into twisted metal. Caleb cursed, twisted the controls, forced the ship into a roll that would have made a real pilot scream. Sparks danced across his panel. Warning lights bled red dot. He coughed, tasted copper. Hull integrity at 22%. They're not playing anymore. He muttered dot, but he didn't stop. He pushed the ship deeper into the asteroid field beyond the rings of Proxima's second moon, where electromagnetic storms twisted sensors and debris fields blurred targeting systems. A place no sane captain would enter. Caleb smiled again. I don't need to win, he whispered. Just need to last. The Syndicate ship followed Dot. It didn't hesitate. He watched them on the rear-view scope, dark and silent, not even bothered by the chaos around them. The ship was alive in a way his wasn't, its hull folding and adjusting like muscle over bone. He could feel their confidence, the certainty of execution. But that was the thing about humans, wasn't it? They never died the way you expected. Caleb activated the last part of the plan, a hidden beacon buried in the courier vessel's secondary. Reactor core is something he had rigged the night before launch. It sent out one message on a tight beam frequency, just wide enough to reach Proxima Station's emergency relay. Pull her out, now. Back on the station, Liana had been hidden under layered jamming fields, buried beneath false signal scramblers. The moment the beacon fired, the station's cloaked shuttle launched in the opposite direction. They weren't escaping far enough to slip into the magnetic turbulence where sensors would drown in noise. Caleb hoped they made it. He'd never know. The Syndicate ship fired again. This time it wasn't a test. A burst of energy slammed into his port side. The ship lurched, cracked, the cockpit filled with smoke and fire. He screamed. Pain flared through his ribs. He could feel blood running warm down his neck, but his hand never left the trigger. And that's when he saw them. Not just ship-stop faces stop for a moment. Just a moment. He thought he could feel them watching. Not with eyes, but through the signal. The same signal that had once turned Liana into silence. The hive mind connection, cold, sterile. It reached out to him now, and in its probing, he felt what Liana had felt her entire life, alone in a crowd of voices that never truly heard. The thought filled him with rage. He opened his comm channel. Not because they would answer, but because he needed them to hear. My name is Caleb Brenner. I'm human. I'm not genetically enhanced. I'm not engineered. I bleed. I cry. But I chose her. I chose to protect someone you left to die. He coughed, spit blood. You think control is power. You think fear is strength. But you never understood the real threat. It's not our weapons. It's not our ships. It's that we love. Even when it hurts. Even when we lose. There was no reply, but the energy beam that charged in front of him was all the response he needed. He closed his eyes and smiled. The courier ship detonated in a blast of artificial gravity collapse, tearing itself into dust across the inner edge of the asteroid field. The Syndicate ship flinched backward, shields absorbing the kinetic fury, but it was too late. The false signal was gone. The echo lost. They had missed her dot far away, hidden beneath the chaos of ion storms and debris drift. A small human shuttle slipped past them, shielded and silent, carrying a single child wrapped in a human's jacket, clutching a comm device pressed to her chest like a heartbeat, the last words recorded on it. "You're not broken, you're the reason I remembered who I was." And then the stars whispered again, not in sorrow, but in defiance. Asterisk, the station lights were softer now, dimmed in mourning. Flags hung low in the central atrium, and an emergency broadcast looped quietly across civilian channels. Courier pilot Renner, presumed lost in the line of unregistered civilian activity, status, deceased in service. But no one turned it off. No one corrected it. Everyone on Proxima Station knew the truth. He hadn't died transporting supplies or patrolling a route. He had died making a choice that none of them had dared to make. A choice to hold on to something no law protected, no treaty acknowledged, and no species but humans ever seemed to understand. Love without condition. Liana stood at the edge of the old engineering platform, watching the stars through a panel Caleb had once repaired with his own 2 hands. Her hands were smaller than his, but they bore fresh bandages now raw from tearing through the access shaft to rewire an emergency cum line during the escape. She hadn't cried when the ship exploded. Not then, but later when the shuttle was quiet, when the stars spun past her window like memories. She had curled into a ball and wept. Not because he was gone, but because he had meant it. He had said she was worth it, and now that belief lived inside her like a second heart dot. She moved differently, now still soft, still quiet, but not afraid. The med officer had given her clearance to stay, at least for now. The station commander, once rigid and cynical, had stopped looking at her like a problem. Now he looked at her the way one stares at a wildfire from afar, with awe, with caution, and the understanding that something powerful had been born from loss. A small memorial had been built in the station's garden pod, where synthetic trees arched over old water tanks converted into walkways. Caleb hadn't wanted fanfare, but Liana had carved his name into a smooth iron panel just beside the oldest tree. Caleb Renner chose to stay. That was all, but that was everything. People came sometimes. Not many, but enough. Engineers, pilots, dockhands. They would bring food or flowers or old things wrapped in cloth. No one spoke loudly there. The garden had become something new. A place where silence was no longer lonely. Liana would sit beside the tree sometimes, legs crossed, Caleb's jacket wrapped around her small frame. The sleeves were too long. She didn't mind. She had grown into it. She still had his cum device. She had never deleted the last message. When she missed him most, she would press it against her chest and play it not through speakers, but through a bio-interface she had built herself, one that allowed the sound to hum inside her bones like a lullaby. "You're not broken. You're the reason I remembered who I was." She was learning to build now. Circuits, nodes, quantum filters. Not for weapons, not for control, but for songs. She had discovered music through Caleb's old Earth files. And it had undone her. Notes rising and falling for no reason other than beauty. Sounds made to feel, not function. It was the most human thing in the universe, and she was determined to add to it. Her first creation was a signal pulse that mimicked the resonance of whale song modulated through a hybrid core built from her own alien biology. She beamed it into deep space, not to summon, not to warn, but simply to exist. Her song, her story, the message attached was simple. I am alive, I was loved, and I remember. Across the stars, no one knew if the Syndicate ever heard it. If they did, they never came back. Maybe they feared what she had become. Not a weapon, not a failure. A human, one evening. She walked to the viewing deck, where a few children were staring out at the black. A younger boy with burn scars asked her if the stars ever spoke. She smiled and said they didn't have to. You just had to learn how to listen. He asked her if she had family. She thought for a long moment. Then she touched the cum against her chest and whispered, I had a father. He was soft and stubborn and brave. He saved me by teaching me how to feel pain without surrendering to it. The boy didn't understand, but that was okay. Later, alone again, Liana sat by the window as a meteor shower flickered like fireflies across the atmosphere. She didn't speak. She sang. No words. Just melody. Just memory. Just a sound that no species had created before, something that belonged to both Earth and the stars beyond it. Her voice filled the small room like light, and somewhere deep in the places only stories go, the stars whispered back, not in command. Not in code, but in hope. Asterisk.